to another edition of the Commodore 64 Compilation Comparison, and this video is another Members' Choice edition. I put a poll up on my channel for my members to pick one of 3 of the Now Games compilations from Virgin Games, and by a narrow margin they chose Now Games 2. They didn't seem to be interested in Now Games 5 at all. That got no votes, and Now Games 3 got 43% of the vote. So yeah, Now Games 2 is what I'm going to be playing. This is a compilation released in 1985 by Virgin Games. It features 5 games and it had a retail price of £8.95. Let's check it out. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the packaging for this game. Unusually for a full price type compilation, it's just released in a small single cassette case. It's an unusual decision by Virgin, but that's what they did. It has got a nice cover though. It's got the Now Games logo. Obviously this is kind of a spin-off of the Now That's What I Call Music series of music compilations. So you can see the Now Games logo at the top there, and then it's got some artwork which depicts the majority of the games that are actually on the compilation, which we'll get to in a moment. So you can see a chicken, a witch, a football, a fist, and I don't know what. Oh, there's a helicopter. So if you don't know what games are on there, you're going to find out in a second. But though that artwork is quite nice, actually. It's a bit of effort's gone into it. It's colourful, it's vibrant. It gives you a flavour of what there's on the compilation without just putting pictures of the game covers on the front. So I quite like that. At the bottom it says 5 fantastic games. That remains to be seen. The spine is a nice orange colour. Actually, the colour scheme of this kind of matches the colour scheme I use on my series, I've just realised, with the purple and orange, but there you go. So yeah, it says Now Games 2 on the spine. Strangely, the catalogue number though is NG3, so I don't know what's going on there. Maybe that's because the Spectrum version had a different catalogue number or something like that. So at the top there it says still available Now Games 1, but we'll skip over that. And you can see that on the back it just tells you what the 5 games are. 5 games, each from a different publisher. So we've got Airwolf, Chuckie Egg 2, Tir Na Nog, or Tir Na Nog, or Tir Na Nog, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that, Cauldron, and World Cup 2. So those are the 5 games on the compilation. Let's take a look inside at the instructions. Before looking at those instructions though, let's take a look at the cassette. Pretty simplistic, it's just a grey cassette with the Now Games 2 printed onto it. So not a sticker, it's actually printed on, as you can see, copyright 1985 Virgin Games, and it's got 2 games on one side and 3 on the other. I think we'll find that out when we look at the instructions, which I'm going to do now. But before we look at the actual instructions, there's quite a lot of information in this inlay. Despite it being a single cassette case, you actually get a screenshot and a description of every game, and also the tape counter recording section, which, as I just said, confirms that there's 2 games on side 1, Airwolf and Chuckie Egg 2, and 3 games on side 2, which are the other 3 games, of course. So yeah, that's quite nice. There's quite a lot of information there, and a lot of compilations at this point didn't put screenshots on them, so that's something that would attract you to it, although you would have had to open the inlay up to actually see the pictures because they're not on the back or anything like that. Anyway, so on the other side, we've got the instructions, which again, for a smallish inlay, pretty comprehensive. I mean, it's got an overview of each game, and also the controls. For Tir Na Nog, or however you pronounce it, there's a lot more information because that's more of a detailed sort of adventure game, so there's a little bit more in the instructions there. And for the games that are more simplistic, there's a little bit less information, but overall the information provided is pretty decent considering it's all crammed onto this quite small single cassette inlay. So yeah, good job Virgin. Obviously whoever did this is long gone from Virgin, I'm sure, but yeah, I think it's a nicely designed bit of packaging. The question now though is, what are the games like? Let's find out. Let's begin with this advert for the compilation, which I found by pure coincidence when looking at an issue of Your Computer magazine from January 1986 when I was prepping for the next edition of the history of BBC Micro typing games. Yep, there is an episode of that coming soon, I promise. Anyway, this advert's pretty simple with the big headline 5 fantastic games. Beneath that it says keep your eyes peeled for Now Games 2. 5 major software hits jostle for your attention on this packed solid with fun cassette. It confirms the price of the compilation at $8.95 and that it was available for the Commodore 64 and Spectrum. There's a recreation of that colourful cover art and screenshots and descriptions of all 5 games. Below the cover image there's a call out to the music compilations that inspired these games ones, saying Now That's What I Call Value. And beneath that is a reminder that still available is the original Now Games compilation, which actually featured 6 games for the same price. Overall, it's a simple but visually striking advert that I think would have attracted plenty of attention. Let's take a look at the 5 games on this compilation now then, and before I start, and to save repeating myself, I'll just mention that all 5 of these games were originally released in 1985. First up we have Airwolf, which was originally released by Elite Systems and is based on the popular early 80s TV show. 5 important US scientists are being held hostage deep in a subterranean base beneath the scorching Arizona desert by the nefarious General Zaranov. As Stringfellow Hawk, you must guide the Airwolf helicopter on a series of perilous night missions and release each scientist in turn. Only destruction of the defense control boxes strategically positioned within the cavern will allow Airwolf to descend into the heart of the base where the scientists are held. Let's start with the positives. This game has a nice title screen, but trust me when I tell you that you'll see it a lot, and it soon gets boring having to watch the helicopter take off over and over again before the game begins. Wow, it didn't take long to start being negative, did it? The graphics are pretty nice, with good animation on the chopper, decent landscapes and a variety of enemies, but it all has a washed out look due to the colour choices. The multi-directional scrolling is smooth, as you'd expect from any half-decent C64 offering. The music is a fairly average rendition of the TV show's theme, and the sound effects are quite basic. The controls are simply awful, as Airwolf bounces around all over the place off the scenery as you try to negotiate the cramped caverns, draining energy every time you hit a wall. You must also constantly tap the joystick upwards to hover. It's very hard to get lined up to drop bombs downwards on targets, and almost impossible to manoeuvre or turn around in tight spaces without losing tons of energy. You only have one life, and as well as rapid energy loss from environmental collisions, there are enemies that kill you immediately. This is a recipe for pure rage. There are lots of walls that you have to shoot holes through, but your shots often miss the bricks even though they should destroy them, and you can't destroy any that aren't on screen, even though you know they are there. It is really tough to make any progress in the game, but once you learn the best route through, it is possible to get the first scientist and return them to the base. That then effectively resets the game, including your energy and all switches and doors, so you have to do it all again, but now it's even harder as the next rescue is further away. Airwolf is a prime example of the low quality of many early movie and TV licenses on home computers. It's an infuriating game, and the annoying thing is, it only needed less twitchy controls and a slightly smaller chopper to make it more fair. Next up we have Chucky Egg 2, originally published by A&F Software. In this sequel to the classic game, Henhouse Harry has a new job in a chocolate egg factory. He must find the ingredients that make the eggs, collect the parts that make up the toys that go inside, and also a variety of objects necessary around the factory. Keys, ladders, girders, etc. which he can use. Unlike the first game that was a single screen platform collect 'em up, this game features multiple screens that Harry can move between at will to complete his tasks. You only have to take a quick look at this game to realise that it's a direct port of the Spectrum version, and there have been no improvements made for the C64 in terms of graphics or sound. Not surprising really, but it does the game no favours. The controls are good and precise like the original game, as you can grab ladders and ropes mid-jump, and there are still some bouncy physics like some versions of the first game had, which for example allow you to jump off ropes, collect an item, bounce off a wall and then back onto the rope. New factors to contend with though is that there is an additional keyboard control for picking up objects, and you can now die from falling a certain height, which you'll probably find out early on to be fair. The game is more of a platform adventure as you move from room to room finding objects to deal with future problems. The first few screens are quite easy to get past, but it's very difficult to negotiate the early room with the spiders until you get used to the controls. After that, many rooms are easier by comparison. It is a pretty tough game and a lot less accessible than its predecessor. The slightest mistake when trying to get on or off ropes and ladders will cost you lives, and some objects that look like collectibles will kill you, which means there's a lot of trial and error involved. There's also a ton of walking around with not much action, and it gets very boring having to go through the early screens again on a new playthrough once you've got past them, especially to get that bone right at the start. To be fair, the game does offer a save function that would help there, but I didn't bother with it for this review. I did get a little further in the game each time I played, though never got close to completing any of the objectives, and the game is not awful once you get used to the controls. Having said that, it doesn't come close to the quality or replayability of the first game. It's that time again where I say thank you to all my channel members, whose names you can see here in my Supporters Hall of Fame. If you're enjoying this video and would like to join these fine folks and support my efforts, why not become a member yourself? For a monthly fee starting from just 99p, you can get access to the special membership perks shown on screen, and more besides. If you're interested, then please click on the join button below this video for more information. If you're not able to commit to a monthly contribution but would still like to support my channel, then you could also give a super thanks. This one-off donation gives you a highlighted comment on whichever video you choose to click the button on, and anyone doing this will also get a shout out from me on a subsequent video. The super thanks button can be found below every video I produce. You can also help raise the profile of this channel by liking this video and leaving a comment, which helps improve my ranking in the mysterious YouTube algorithm. Any support you can give, financial or otherwise, is greatly appreciated. The third game on the compilation is Tir Na Nog, originally published by Gargoyle Games. Tir Na Nog is a Gaelic phrase meaning land of youth, the Celtic other world. This game is about the exploits of the hero Coulson following his departure from the world of the living and his entry into Tir Na Nog. His subsequent attempts to locate and reunite the fragments of the Seal of Callum form the basis of a vast interactive adventure set in the magical landscapes of Celtic mythology. Coulson may carry up to 4 objects which you can pick up, drop and thrust with in combat. As you make your way through the Land of Youth, each scene may be viewed from 4 directions, indicated by a compass on screen. There is a status area on the screen which describes the current location, what is being carried and any other information that has been volunteered by other creatures in the game. Throughout the game you'll meet strange creatures. Try to persuade them to help you, but they may prefer to fight you. Even when you've located the pieces of the Seal of Callum, you must persuade the current owners to give them up. No creature can be killed, only deterred. You must keep to the paths and roads that crisscross Tir Na Nog. Some doors are open while some are closed and need ingenuity to open them. All objects have different powers and strengths. Many are useful, but some should be disposed of. The game is controlled by keyboard only. On the bottom row of the keyboard, alternate keys let you move left and right. On the second row, alternate keys will change the viewing angle 90 degrees left or right. On the third row, alternate keys allow you to pick up or drop an object, and on the top row, any key allows you to nominate one of your carried objects, so it's used in the next thrust or drop. The spacebar is used for thrusting. This is another game that clearly originated on the Spectrum with its single colour graphics, but they are really nicely drawn with beautiful animation on the player character and most creatures that you encounter. The environment looks good too, with parallax scrolling and animated backgrounds giving it a sense of depth. Unfortunately, I found the text that describes the areas and objects quite hard to read due to it originating on the higher resolution Sinclair machine, and it was especially difficult to make out on an LCD screen. Having been ported from the Speccy, the sound effects are very basic, and it's a huge shame that this version didn't get some atmospheric fantasy themed SID music, as that would have made it more engrossing as you traverse the huge map. The keyboard controls are complicated initially, but I did get used to them, though I often found myself rotating the wrong direction as I changed perspective, or dropping items instead of picking them up. The different perspectives of viewing the environment is a clever idea, and you often have to look around or you may miss doors. There is however lots of trial and error needed to get around, and mapping is essential if you're going to play it properly. How much graph paper you need and where you'd start drawing on it when the game begins would be interesting to find out though. On my playthroughs, I roamed around for a while, found lots of locations and objects, but never really achieved anything. I kept getting killed and sent back to the start by the monkey-like creatures that roam the land. No item I found seemed to stop them. There are no lives to lose, you just keep getting sent back to the start, so you could play the game forever. I felt though that you need some kind of early quick win in the game, solving a puzzle or defeating an enemy to keep you going, and I never felt like I was going to manage that. I think the design and look of the game are really good, and it has the framework for being a great adventure game, but it's hard to persist when you make no early progress and keep getting sent back to the start, and I never got engrossed enough in it to keep trying. The next game is Cauldron, originally released by Palace Software. In this game you play the role of a witch who must find 6 ingredients to create a spell that will destroy the giant pumpkin who has taken over the land. The ingredients for your spell are juice of toad, eye of newt, wing of bat, hemlock root, mouldy piece of bone and some molten lava from the smoking isle. You must fly across the land on your broomstick searching for the keys to the underworld, avoiding all manner of nasty creatures. You can only take off and land on grassy clearings, as trying to fly through the trees causes a witch to tumble off and lose a life. Each coloured key that you find opens only the same coloured door, and once you've entered the realm beneath, you have to jump from platform to platform to pick up the required ingredient for the spell. You can only collect one item at a time and must then return to your cottage to place the item in the cauldron. When the spell's complete, you can then proceed to defeat the giant pumpkin. This is a game I've looked at in depth before, as it was re-released in Firebird's budget range, and as a result I reviewed it as part of my Silverbird selection series a few years ago. I'll put a link to that review in the corner of the screen now. Cauldron is a highly polished game with slick presentation, colourful and well-drawn graphics, smooth scrolling, a brilliant SID tune on the title screen, and impressive in-game sounds too. Unfortunately, that's all undone by the horrific difficulty level. In every element of the game, control with the witch is infuriating. On the ground, she's slow and unable to defend herself, so is vulnerable to enemy attacks, and boy do they attack. When flying on the broom, there is at least the opportunity to attack enemies, but doing so drains your magic level, and constantly respawning and erratically moving enemies drain enough of that as it is. This becomes especially annoying when you have to pass over the sea, where seagulls attack you from behind at the edge of the screen, and you have no chance of knowing when they'll appear. Control with the broom is also tricky, as it has some inertia and you'll find it very hard to pick a safe spot to land on or pick up the essential keys. That's not helped by the fact that collision with any landscape element on the broom will cost you a life. If you make it to one of the platforming stages where you collect the ingredients, it doesn't get any easier. Pixel perfect jumping is required, there are numerous leaps of faith onto another screen, and the enemies are plentiful. Only through repeated plays and incredible patience will you make any real progress, but you'll often lose 2 or 3 lives before you even find a key and access one of those areas. It is possible to refresh your magic, but the restore points are often really hard to reach, and you'll usually lose more magic and lives than you gain by getting there. This is genuinely a gorgeous game for the time it was released, but it's a nightmare to play, and realistically you're going to need a cheat mode to get anywhere close to completing it. If only it had been properly playtested, it could have been a true classic. The final game on the compilation is World Cup 2, originally published by Arctic and also known as World Cup Football or later World Cup Carnival, but let's not get into that. This game allows you to experience the intense excitement of the games leading up to the World Cup final. From 1 to 8 people can select teams from a pool of 40 and battle it out. You can play each game against a friend or the computer. The player you control is the one nearest the ball and he will change colour. To change the player you control, press fire and the nearest one to the ball will be activated. The fire button is also used for shooting and passing, and when the ball's near to the goal you'll automatically dive in the direction of the ball if you press fire. The presentation in this game is fairly good, with a reasonable title screen, a choice of teams to play as, and options for switching the music on or off. On that note, it's very unusual to have in-game music on a footy game, and the choice of tune is odd, but there are very few sound effects when the music is switched off, so it's actually better to keep it on. The graphics are okay, with a nicely drawn pitch that scrolls smoothly and has advertising boards on the side with famous retailers of the day on them. The players are big and blocky, but are animated well, apart from the keeper who is just a mess when he dives. There's no animation on the ball, it's just a red blob, although it does cast a shadow when it's in the air, which is a nice touch. One aesthetic disappointment is that the team strip colours can't be changed. You're always playing as yellow versus blue, no matter what country you're playing as. Gameplay is pretty bad. Each team only has 6 players and none of them move when they're off the ball, so passing is just hit and hope a player is near the ball when it stops. And it does stop dead frequently, by the way. The goalie can't be controlled other than to dive, which you often do by mistake when the ball is near him, which can lead to leaving an open goal. Goal kicks and throw-ins are automatic, so often just bounce the ball off an opposition player who's in their path, which also causes problems. It's pretty much impossible to put any decent moves together, but it is fairly easy to just dribble the ball into the opposition area and score. I also found that lots of own goals were scored on both sides due to daft rebounds or computer-controlled players hitting the ball the wrong way. Speaking of which, the computer AI is very weird, as players will regularly take the ball from your penalty area all the way back into their own half and then start an attack from there. The AI keeper is also better than yours, which meant I never managed to win a game despite scoring a few goals. This might have been just about okay as a 2-player game, but it's very average compared to Commodore's International Soccer, which is a couple of years older. Also, Scotland won the World Cup in one of my playthroughs, which is just nonsense. So that was Now Games 2, the first compilation I've looked at that was released by Virgin Games, and in theory this offered a fairly attractive collection of action-focused games at a competitive price. How did it fare in practice though? As usual, let's give each game an individual score before calculating the overall compilation rating. Kicking things off was Airwolf, which is a fairly early example of a TV tie-in game that looks the part but is crippled by twitchy controls and a high difficulty level that'll make you want to throw your joystick out the window. I'm giving it a score of 4 out of 10. Chucky Egg 2 is a very different kind of game to the first one, and not really in a good way. It is playable once you get used to the controls, but the flick screen platform adventure style gameplay is nothing special. It's just about the best game in this collection though, and I'm going to score it 6 out of 10, although that's possibly a tad generous. Tir Na Nog has some lovely graphics despite being a Spectrum port, and the game engine could lend itself to a really good action adventure once you get to grips with the complex controls. Unfortunately, after playing it for 20 minutes or so, I'd made no progress whatsoever, which rendered it too boring to carry on with. I appreciate that playing it for longer may make it more rewarding, but for what I experienced, I'm scoring it 5 out of 10. Cauldron was a true showcase for the C64's capabilities when it was released, a real feast for the eyes and ears. Sadly, that's all undone by the brutally unfair difficulty level that makes this game a true horror to play. 5 out of 10 for this one too. And finally, World Cup Football is a reasonably good looking football game for the time, but it falls down where it really matters, which is in the gameplay. It may have been just about functional as a 2-player game, but there were much better alternatives available even in 1985, so this one gets 4 out of 10. Moving on to the overall compilation rating, you can probably already guess this isn't going to come out too high, but I'll be honest, the packaging is probably the high point here. The choice to use a single cassette case instead of a larger box means it may have got lost amongst other titles on the store shelves, but the cover artwork is colourful, the design is nice, and the presence of screenshots and game descriptions puts this ahead of many other compilations released at the time. There's also some pretty good instructions for all the games, so very little to complain about, and I'm scoring it 9 out of 10. The score for the 5 games averages out at a disappointing 4.8, and in terms of value for money, well, with an RRP of £8.95, this was a little cheaper than its competitors at the time, and 5 games for under £2 each seems like a good deal. Could you have got that amount of value out of each game? Just about. Would you have had a good time doing so? Not really. For that reason, I'm going to go with a pretty average value for money score of 6 out of 10. Crunching those numbers together means that Now Games 2 gets a compilation rating of 59%. Time now to see what the gaming press thought of Now Games 2 back in 1985, or actually 1987, as the only review I could find is from one of Zap's crucial compilation comparisons from the May 1987 edition. This is actually the same one I looked at a couple of months ago when I was reviewing They Sold a Million. I've had to hack this review together a little bit as it spanned 2 columns in the magazine. As usual, there's a short write-up about each game and an overall rating for the compilation. It describes Airwolf as an addictive multi-directional scrolling exploration game which seems to have little to do with a television series. Not really a review, is it that? For Tir Na Nog, it says a unique arcade adventure with lots to do and explore, but it never really captured the imagination of 64 owners, and I can kind of get that because it does look like a Spectrum game. For Cauldron, it says Palace Software's spooky arcade adventure still compares favourably with many recent releases. Of course, that was written in 1987, 2 years after the game was originally released. Absolutely no mention of the difficulty level on the game, but that's not surprising because Zap gave that game 87% in the very first issue of the magazine. Ridiculous. It then says for Chucky Egg, awful graphics hide a highly playable platform game, and because it says Chucky Egg rather than Chucky Egg 2, I wonder which game they're actually talking about there. If it was the first game, then I agree. If it's the second one, not so much. And finally, for World Cup, it says a tedious football simulation with crude graphics and feel. I didn't think the graphics were that bad, but the overall game wasn't great. There's not really high praise for any of the 5 games, but then it gives an overall rating of 80%, saying the inclusion of World Cup lets the package down, but otherwise this is an unusual and worthwhile cross-section of game types. I mean, that is true, no 2 games are the same, but none of them are really any good, so I'm just going to have to disagree with Zap's assessment of this one, I think. Time to round off this episode as I always do by taking a look at where the compilation features in my league table, except of course it doesn't, because the qualifying threshold for the full price compilation league table is 63%, and Now Games 2 doesn't make the grade. It was never going to with those 5 average titles in it really, was it? Of course that means it's not going to make the combined rankings that also factor in budget compilations as well. And with that, that brings yet another episode of the Commodore 64 compilation comparison to a close. If you agree or disagree with my assessment of this compilation, or have got any comments on the 5 games that it contains or the compilation as a whole, then please let me know in the video comments. And if you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like. For the next edition of this series, I'm going to be taking a look at a budget compilation that will feature 4 games. Which one? Well, if you're watching this video at the time it's released, then there's a poll on my channel right now where you can influence that decision. That video will be along in about a month's time, and in the meantime there'll be plenty of other retro gaming content on this channel, so stay tuned. Thanks very much for watching this video, and until the next one, see ya!